You're coasting with Fine Time.
Hello, party people. It's your boy Dre, and per usual, on the Nintendo Switch Online beat, I am joined by Steve.
I like video games. Woo!
Says who?
Me. I only asked for my opinion, and I researched that one pretty well, I think.
That's not what you said last night. That was supposed to, that's bad. I didn't really have a joke. I had nothing. I had no ammo. We're back. We're here to talk Nintendo Switch Online again. But this time, instead of just going through the latest games, which is how we usually do this stuff, I wanted to just focus in on a few of them. Well, to be more precise, 6 of them. So this way we don't have to chase around. Usually we're worried about our episodes going out of date. Oh, they're going to release more stuff by the time we, this episode goes up. We don't have to worry about that this time, Steve.
Oh no, it's going to be another episode where they came out with a 4th Russian beat that no one's ever heard of until right now.
That has yet another US title that's different for us, or intro or whatever. So yeah, we just picked 6 games from Nintendo Switch Online. We tried to mostly keep it to stuff that we hadn't played before, or at least hadn't played in a really long time or aren't that familiar with. Like, we didn't want to come on here and just talk Mario 3 or something that's boring. So, we tried to pick stuff that is a little bit off the beaten path. But Steve, I think we should be honest with the people up front.
We didn't pick too many winners this time, guys.
We
in our new format here.
We sure didn't, unfortunately. So typically, the reason why we started doing these in the first place is because me and Steve were sick of the complaining online about the lineups on these apps. People kept going, where's Chrono Trigger and where's Earthbound? Earthbound is there now, but for a long time, that's all you heard. And we're like, guys, there's so many great things to play on these apps. Go play them.
Yeah, and I still like to do that, but, unfortunately not everything is a winner because, even back in the day, you were kind of taking life into your own hands. We didn't have the internet back then. We were at the mercy of magazines and posters and, word of mouth on the playground. And, sometimes we ended up with Beethoven's Second for the weekend on Super Nintendo.
That game traumatized you. It's not the first time I've heard you talk about Beethoven's Second.
Yeah, but it didn't traumatize me as much as, at least I didn't own that game. What really traumatized me for life was Chester Cheetah Too Cool to Fool, which will never appear on this thing. I'm pretty sure. Right? Prove me wrong. Actually, don't prove me wrong.
Yeah, don't prove him wrong. Don't prove him wrong. Was that still a Sunsoft joint?
What?
Chester Cheetah?
Oh, no, that was Kaneko.
Oh, right.
We're not stealing the Namco logo at all, wink.
Not at all. Anyway, unfortunately, most of the games we picked for this podcast did not turn out to be very good. We usually do these, again, to highlight the really good stuff on here, but that just wasn't the case. So forewarned, we're not going to tell you about a bunch of hidden gems today, but I think this will be a fun discussion. Well, okay, let's get started with our first game. First up, we have Blaster Master Enemy Below, which came out in September 2000 for Game Boy Color. And you could say it's a reimagining of the original NES game of sorts, Steve. I guess that's the best way to put it. It's not exactly the same as that, but...
I mean, that's very generous of you to say. But to be fair, there are a lot of established franchises that received a lot of good but overlooked interpretations on the Game Boy. I mean, everyone should go play Burger Time Deluxe, which is on the app, but we're not talking about that one right now. Unfortunately, Blaster Master Enemy Below is not one of these adaptations.
It's very, very strange, right? Because it feels like a port of the NES game at first, but it's not one. Like, all the same level motifs are there. And the music is there too in its own special way, if you want to call it that.
It sounded like the first area, we all know the Area 1 music. It sounded like it was just drinking too hard all night and it's trying to just get home, and it doesn't sound right. It sounds like it's sick. Not the good kind of, it's the year 2000 and it's sick. It's like, oh no, it's not feeling good. We need to get it to the hospital quick.
It's not SYCKK sick.
It needs medical attention fast.
But yeah, the level layouts are completely different from NES. So it's like based off it, but not really. It's very segmented and maze-like. Like, because like the first game, it was cool at the time because it felt so wide open and expansive, right? Like it felt like, oh my God, you're in this huge like underground cave thing, or you're in this like huge underwater thing. This doesn't feel big. It feels cramped, obviously, because it's Game Boy Color. And I think you know what I'm going to say next. Screen crunch. Oh, baby. Like... They tried to do the NES sprites exactly, basically, which is not something you should be doing on a handheld, and something we should learn by the year 2000 not to do on Game Boy. But Steve, they did it here, and they shouldn't have.
It's weird because Metroid 2 is also on this app, and it's almost a decade older, if not exactly a decade older, and that feels closer to what it's supposed to be than, what Blaster Master's trying to do. Trying to feel maze-like and such. Nothing about this feels right.
It really doesn't. The whole project feels kind of poisoned. I mean, Blaster Master was in a weird spot at this time. If you remember, a year after this would come Blaster Master Enemy Below on PS1. Yes, there was PS1 games in 2001. And I actually do like this game for its like cheesy PS1 tank controls charm. Yes, you're driving a tank, but you know what I mean. And the music is bitchin'. You know how far that goes with me. But also, so I feel like they were conscious of the screen crunch because the game moves at like a snail's pace. So they tried to compensate, Steve, but not really.
I mean, they tried to compensate, but it's in the end, it still feels like shit because I feel like the Sophia feels broken. Like we need to get out and fix the tires. Like it just moves at a snail's pace. The jumping feels wrong, and then you get out of the tank, and that doesn't feel so well either because I feel like the walk around portions are even longer than they were on the NES.
Yeah, and they don't they're just not nearly as well constructed because you don't have the big rooms. Again, you had the Zelda like screen by screen sections as well on the NES version. But in this, it just feels like the NES game, but worse, just everything markedly worse. Like if the original game were as average as it possibly could be. I got through about 2 areas of this game, Steve. I beat the second boss and I was like, I don't want to play this anymore.
See, you made it a bit further than me. I made it to the second area and it felt like the rooms were looping and I was getting oddly claustrophobic. I'm like, who am I trying to prove this to? And I'm like, I'm done.
You know what? I'm glad you mentioned that because actually that was the worst part of the game. If you notice in area 2, you just keep going to the right. You won't hit a wall. Those rooms just loop over and over on almost like a, what would you call it back in the day? Warp. What's the word I'm trying to think of? In Joust or Balloon Fight, when you go to one side of the screen and then, or Ice Climber or something like that.
Yeah. I don't
wrap
know.
Wrap around.
Okay.
Wrap around. Yeah. It's fucking... Man, I don't know why the stages are wraparound. That doesn't make any sense. If you're going to make an action adventure game and you're going to have all the stuff to explore, you got to have people hit a wall so you can get your mental, I don't think this game has a map.
I was about to say, especially since I'm about to be a little bitch and say, there's no fucking map for me to look at.
I'm less of the type of person to call for a map than Steve, but even I was like, come on, if you're going to make it wrap around, you got to give me that. You have to. Even if it's the crappy map like in Goonies 2 that doesn't tell you anything. At least pretend,
Enemy below, more like Oh, wait, you already did that. Never mind.
Oh my God. Let's move on to the next game.
So our next game is Excitebike 64 for the Nintendo 64. Obviously, could you imagine if this was for Sega Genesis? They just called the game Excitebike 64. Anyway, it's a 3D update of the NES game for the new millennium. Ooh, ah.
The Y2K millennium, because it came out in May 2000. That's about when I turned 18. This is the right time for me to enjoy some Excitebike 64. But I never had this game back in the day, Steve.
I didn't either. And when I turned it on, I had to say this was incredibly year 2000. I don't know. You had this faux grunge playing in the background, and these biker bios like, Grease likes to work part-time at the burger shop while going to buy more bike parts. Oh, yeah. And shit that has nothing to do with anything else you're doing in the game or in any meaningful. I'm like, this is year 2000 as shit.
I think the idea at the time was like, you know, whether it's like a skateboarding game or whatever, or a motocross game like this, they're so dedicated to their craft that it's like, oh man, I have to work part-time at Burger King to afford to race because that's all he cares about. Burger King by day, motocross by night or something, you know, like this very cheesy, like, okay, yeah, he has a job so he can like fuck off in his spare time. That's not really that cool. But yeah, that was like a thing back then for some reason. I really don't know why. You mentioned the music. I guess we can start there. God, the soundtrack in this, oh, baby, you are correct. But here's the thing about it. It is very year 2000, but at the same time, it is also quite mid 90s. Like you have that very 1996-ish hip hop, like, you know, before you start the race. I don't know if it's like you're picking your character or whatever, or they're showing you a track preview, but you have that one hip hop track, which intros it. Sounds like something we play on Fine Time, to be honest. And then, I guess it's weird to me. This has always been weird to me that this is called Excitebike 64. It's just your typical motocross game. This could have been called anything. I guess Nintendo just wanted them to call it that for name recognition. But like, what's very Excitebike about this, Steve?
See, I played through a very, very lengthy tutorial, and we all know how much I love tutorials, but holy shit, I feel like I needed to take notes on a real ass notebook because there was going to be a test on the end for all the shit they wanted me to do. Because you remember Excitebike on the NES, also on this app? Yep. How easy that fucking was to play?
Uh-huh. Sure was.
Like, oh, do this, but here on N64, oh, push this combination of buttons to do a flip. Push this one to kind of jump to the side, but make sure you push it back so you don't crash your ass. I just wish all this sort of thing made it sort of feel like Excitebike, but other than sort of clumsily knocking down other racers on occasion, it really has nothing to do with Excitebike other than that and it being named that in the title.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think they were trying to implement so you know how in the original Excitebike, you like in midair, you press forward and back to angle your bike? You know, I think this game still has that. But
it doesn't feel right.
Yeah, it doesn't feel right. It's not like Wave Race where like you're pushing forward or back on the control stick to like angle yourself over the waves or something. Because you know in that game, if you're coming up a big wave and you're just holding back, you're just gonna flip or you're gonna crash. So you can't really do that. I feel like Excitebike 64 was trying to get some of that flavor, but I don't really think that works in 3D as well. Or at least it doesn't in this game. I haven't played a motocross game in a current one in forever, so I don't know. But
it's been a long time since I've really played anything like that too. But I also need to bring up that since I did play the tutorial in its entirety, your reward for that is the original ass Excitebike in its entirety, which is redundant in today's environment where we have that on the other app, but in the year 2000, can you imagine just having that on your NES? Like, oh, thank God there's a good game on here after all.
No, that kind of stuff was very sought after back then. That would have, you're right, that would have been a boon, and I probably would have played that way more than I played Excitebike 64. Honestly, I just don't have a whole lot to say about this one. It's just your typical racing game of the time period. It's fine, but there's just nothing that special about it either. And you know what? The Nintendo 64 has a lot of great racers, man. There's F-Zero X, there's Ridge Racer 64, there's Wipeout 64, even Extreme G, I would probably say is better than Excitebike 64. There's just not much reason to go back to this one. I don't know why it sold so many copies.
Was it a big seller? I don't even know.
It was a big seller. It's a big seller.
Because I feel like it was like they just wouldn't stop advertising it for a while, and then they just stopped advertising it.
No, it was a big seller. It sold a lot of copies. So I don't know. It's fine. Look, if I had received this at the time for a birthday or Christmas or something, I'd be like, it's fine. I would have played it just fine. I did. Okay, before we move on, I did like the outside environments more than like the motocross arenas. Like when did you do a course where you're like out kind of like in the mountainous area or like?
I mean, I've seen the footage. It looks nice enough, but I don't know how much of that I could really, put up with. Like you said, there's so many other better choices.
Okay, with that, let's move on to the next game. Our next game is Pokemon Trading Card Game. Came out April 2000 for Game Boy Color. And it's just as it sounds. It's a video game version of the popular card game, still popular today. But at that time, it was just beginning to become popular. And this game capitalized on it, Steve, in a way that I think we don't talk about enough. I feel like more people probably got into the card game because of this game than like just playing the cards at school or seeing your friends have them.
I mean, it's very possible. Me and Vin discussed this in our Pokemon spin-off game show, however briefly, but it's not a big secret. The game's was outdated a month after release. It only covers the first 3 sets and however many promo cards, and then it was already outdated. But you know what? I still think it's the gold standard for TCG game adaptations. I still think it's incredibly easy to get into and start playing. I would still say this is like the way to learn how to, start from the beginning as far as trying to teach yourself a trading card game is concerned, because that was not easy to do. Only now we're finally, sort of making it easy, because at the time, the other trading card adaptations that were available were very not beginner friendly, or assumed you already knew what you were doing, or just a big slog. And here on Game Boy Color, no, lots of fun and fun things to do, and you can actually play. People have actually played this game before. But what about you, Andre? Did you like this game?
I liked this game a lot. This game was fantastic. This was honestly incredible. The way they explained the game, you have to get through that, because explaining a card game is just tough. And originally, I tried to play this game in Japanese because Pokemon typically has easy peasy language. And I was good up until we got to explaining the card game. And I was like, okay. I cannot do this. I cannot do this in my second language, which is not my second language yet, because I cannot speak it fluently. So I got to switch to English for this. If it wasn't for that, though, I would have probably gone through. I should probably, if like Pokemon Yellow or some shit like comes up on here, I should try to play that in Japanese. I bet that would be like nice, easy peasy language for me to get through. Anyway, I really enjoyed the Pokemon trading card game. There is a line of dialogue that made me laugh, and this is going to trigger something we always complain about when it comes to Nintendo Switch Online, is that some NPC was like, it might be easier if you read the Pokemon trading card instruction booklet while we play. Well, Nintendo, how about you let us do that sometime? Huh?
I love these fucking apps, but I don't love that about these apps.
Oh, man, and they could so easily. Never mind, I'm not going to get into it. Yeah, this game is excellent. I love the no-frills approach, though. I love how they just, like, teach you how to play the game, and then it's like, okay, go to any of the 8 clubs you want and go play cards. And that's it. That's the entire scenario of the game. Obviously, they didn't want to spend money making like a whole like story or whatever, and they shouldn't, because it's about the card game. And they leave it about that. And that is so smart. Not just like economically, like for a game, but like just as a design, because it just gets you right to the point. And you can tell, I mean, I played a decent amount of it, but you can tell there's a lot of content here to keep you occupied. I know everyone I know who has played this game has loved it for a reason. And I get it now.
I played it again for the first time in a long time, and I did have fun going through the 8 clubs again. Again, it's you just pop them on a map. You're not like running around through an overworld or anything. I just forgot how much of a time capsule this actually was. There's a handful of NPCs you can actually trade cards with because this is a trading card game. But then there's freaking Ema Kearney. He's this NPC that's based off of a real guy that was on some kind of Pokemon news show at the time. He is a goddamn time capsule of the time, and he still appears with promo cards IRL that like aren't good to play. They're just gag cards.
Okay.
Then there's other cards that were just in the game to be in the game with video gamey effects. Yes, I know a bunch of them were printed later to actually work in real life, but don't at me at that. But you had things that just randomly did shit. And they did kind of try to do that later with the e-reader when some of them had bonus moves that the e-reader would try to make you do.
Oh my
God.
God.
You had to play. Yeah, but you had to actually play the game with somebody in order to do that. And nobody actually fucking did that because are you fucking kidding?
Oh, boy. Yeah, that sounds, I mean, look, I've never played the card game IRL, so I can't speak to it, but definitely this game, I don't think this game would have made me want to. I probably mentioned before on the show, I was like a big like Dragon Ball Z card game person. That was probably the card game I was going to stick to. But yeah, the graphics are exactly what you expect in this game, but the music is particularly great here. I know the big three didn't work on this, so I don't know who composed this, but whoever did, hats off to them. They nailed it. The music in this game is stupendous.
Yeah, I don't know either because the credits are incredibly vague. Other than that, Hudson's name appears at the end of them, and it might just be someone there having a day trip. They did a lot of Game Boy Color games. They were like 2 or 3 Wars games on there that they like threw at Hudson to do on Game Boy Color. Like they were just day workers on Game Boy Color in Japan.
Are we sure this isn't a secret Tosei joint? I mean, it sure feels like it could have been.
It could have been.
Yeah.
There was a sequel a year later on Game Boy Color that doesn't go much further in sets from this, but we didn't get that one, oddly enough. Well, not too oddly, because Game Boy Advance was coming, and even they weren't going to commit that much suicide.
I heard that one has an actual story, though.
Yes, it does, and I barely know what it is. I never played it.
All right. Sorry to do this, Steve, but now we have to talk about something bad.
Our next game is going to be Castlevania Legends, released in March 1998 for the Game Boy. It's the third Castlevania game released for the Game Boy, released 7 years after the second one, starring Sonia Belmont.
Okay. Yeah, Sonia Belmont. That's a character, right? I mean, like, all we really know about her is those wild anime portraits, which, I mean, I'm going to mention them up front, Steve, because that might be the only real good thing about this game, is its art.
Oh, you didn't like the sprite work they did on Sonia, where they made damn sure you saw the Belmont booty scoot across the screen?
I mean, look, if you're going to have a female Belmont... I mean, look, we've established on the show very early on that Belmonts had big dick energy. Not just big dick energy. It's just, it runs in the family. So if you're a female Belmont, you got to have a little something,
Well, she's got something.
Alucard is in this game at some point, and he also has very... What? What's so funny?
Oh, you know what's so funny.
No, okay. I don't. I'm asking you.
People at home are never going to play this, so you have to fight Alucard at some point, such as you do. And right after you beat him, you get the anime portrait of Alucard again, and he goes, "Ow, ow, 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 ow."
Oh man, this game is special. Like, you guys think the dialogue in, like, I don't know, Circle the Moon is stupid? Like, this is just wow. This game sucks. I am a fan of the first two Castlevania Game Boy games. You are not so much. I guess you're not a fan of Castlevania Adventure. I kind of forget how you feel about the second one that I can't remember the name of.
Not as good, but I'm not as big a fan of that either, no.
Okay. I really like those games, and I think this Castlevania Legends sucks. And I think a good way to explain why this game sucks is that the theming is really bad. And for Castlevania, that's like, you have to nail that. But like, what even are these levels, Steve? One screen, it looks like you're in a library. The next one, it's like you're in some nondescript ruins. So you're thinking like, okay, am I below this like castle or something like that? And then you're like, God knows where the next second, you're like outside with some like pillars. And it's like, okay, is this the same place? There's that sense of like movement and that language, like the levels tell the story. Castlevania Legends does not have that at all, and you have to have that in Castlevania. And you can't use the "it's on Game Boy" excuse, because the first two games do this very well. You don't like those games, and you have to even admit that.
It does. And I think Castlevania Legends does tell a story. It tells the story of, look, we need to cross-promote a Symphony of the Night with, with a smaller game on Game Boy. Just crank this shit out. And then, you had other little themes along the way, like, some levels had pits with monsters in them, and other ones had dead ends with monsters in them. And that's how the developers felt while making this game. Like, they were just trapped. Making shit. That was the theme of the game.
What? How? That didn't make any sense. At some point, I whipped a candle, and then I got trapped. I got teleported into a kind of kill room where like a million zombies would appear, and you can barely make it out of that alive. Good luck to you if you don't have a whip power up yet. And it's just like, why did that happen? And I thought, like, at the end of that, okay, it's some sort of bonus room, and at the end they'll give me something. No, you don't get anything. So.
See, I thought at the end of that, the candle was at the other side was going to drop something, but no, it drops you into that fucking room again. It starts the shit all over. And I'm like, no, we're not doing this shit twice. And I'm using the power of Game Boy, Nintendo Switch Online to rewind back to that point, because we're not doing this twice.
I do not blame you.
We are not fucking doing this twice. And I couldn't imagine doing that on a Game Boy either. I saw on the box there's Super Game Boy. I couldn't imagine it looking too great on there. But oh my God, could you imagine playing that on your brick of a Game Boy or even the Game Boy Pocket?
No, I honestly didn't know this game existed for years, Steve. I didn't.
I think this is another one of those games that's famous for being expensive on eBay. Except unlike something like Radical Rescue, you don't want to play this. You don't want to fucking play this. What were these fucking bosses? I feel like those are the touchstone moments of a good Castlevania game. The bosses, you had fucking Man-Bat in the first level, ripped right from Batman the animated series. Like, oh ho, I'm a man that is also a bat, and now I'm going to fight Sonya. I'm like, oh, okay, that's great. and then you eventually end up at Dracula. And his pattern could be boiled down to, he shoots fireballs as, in his Mandrake form, like he usually does. And then he shoots more fireballs as Spirit of Halloween Dracula Mask Dracula.
Like, that was so wild. That was so weird. Yeah, you just have to like shoot his mask that's like floating around the screen while like Big Drac is in the background. It's so stupid. And I was so done with the game. I did start rewinding at that point because I'm like, I don't want to learn this. I don't respect this game at all or like it. I'm just cheating. I don't care.
I feel like the game gave you a good way to cheat anyway, because once I got the clock, I don't know if that was 1 or 2 levels in, I was using that just to cheese, like walk right past enemies and shit. I'm like, I'm not dealing with any of you people if I don't have to. These levels were so big and featureless, as you already pointed out. What am I looking at? Nothing.
Yeah, do you like how they tried to do like a clock tower thing for like a third of a level, but then that's like not a thing anymore, and then you just go into some other bullshit? It was so directionless. The music doesn't save it here, too. There's some like good tunes. They're not nearly as good as the first two Castlevania games on Game Boy. So, I mean, look, the Castlevania The Adventure is cheating. I mean, that features like some choice Norio Hanazawa shit. I get it. You're not going to match that, especially since he's gone to Treasure at this point. But like at the same time, come on, guys. Could be a little better than that. There was, I think the first stage starts off with what I could only describe as Bloody Tears Part 2.
I mean, kind of.
Yeah, that's about all I could say. I mean, like, it starts out like Bloody Tears, but it's not really that. I don't know. It was a weird take on it. You got anything else to say about Castlevania Legends?
Yeah, don't play it. Don't fucking bother.
Okay. All right, let's move on to our next game. All right, next up, we have Comix Zone, released August 1995 for the Sega Genesis. And I think a lot of people know what this game is, but in case you don't, it's this very stylish comic book panel beat 'em up. And it was developed by Sega Technical Institute. You know, they made Sonic 2 and 3 and Spinball and The Ooze, excuse me. I have to say it like we did. The Ooze. Cowabunga dudes. I have played Comix Zone before. I originally played it on Virtual Console, on Wii Virtual Console back in the day. Didn't really care for it. I think it was also on the Sega Genesis compilation for 360, the one that also has Master System and arcade games for some reason.
Sounds like something it'd be on.
Yeah, I just, obviously, Steve, it's a super cool concept. That's why everyone knows about it. And I remember being plastered over all the magazines back in the day. But when I finally got my hands on it, I kind of thought it sucked. But for the purposes of this podcast, because we like to be fair to everything, I was like, okay, I'm going to wash those memories out of my mind. I'm going to approach Comix Zone completely fresh as I can. And I'm going to give this game another shot. We're going to start over. And you know what? Actually, before I say what I think, why don't you tell me your history with Comix Zone?
Comix Zone is a beat 'em up from latter-day Genesis times where you punch things in a comic book motif. Andre, that is the most I knew about this game, like, forever. Because, you know, it'd be on all the hidden gems on your Genesis lists. And I managed to miss it on Virtual Console for whatever reason that was. So I was super de-duper excited to play it on my Switch Sega Genesis collection, where I came up to a very similar conclusion as you, where, oh my God, this is awful. What is wrong with you people? But like you, I'm trying to rewipe the slate clean for this. It's on the NSO, open mind and big hearts. Like, oh my God, this sucks. I know the Sega fans love this thing, and on paper, this sounds like the greatest idea in the world, but oh my God, it just, as soon as the game starts, you get past that funky ass intro, and it just trips on itself immediately.
Yeah,
I feel like
this game is just not good, man. It's not good. And okay, I'll say the few good things besides the obviously just the concept and everything. The low color output of the Sega Genesis actually really works in this game's favor because it's comic book style, and you know how comic books use that, what is it called, stipulation or whatever to, yeah. The Genesis obviously does that too because it doesn't have the color depth like a Super Nintendo to do everything at once. So it has to rely on those techniques. So it really does look like a comic book in that regard. And I thought the limitations of the system worked in its favor, and they used it that way, which is cool. And like I said, they nailed the concept. All the, like, you punch people and they turn into little pieces of paper or something, or the way you go in between the comic book panels kind of leaps between them or swings across them or whatever, like they're actual like physical things. Like, that's cool. They got all those details right. As for what they got wrong, it's almost everything else. Can we just start with just the fact that this is a beat 'em up and this is maybe like some of the worst combat? Like at this time, Steve, for linear plane, for single plane beat 'em ups, we already had Ninja Warriors, SNES. We already had like other stuff that was doing this kind of thing way better. Like compare Ninja Warriors to this, and it's not even fucking close. I mean, if you ask me.
Nope. Not even a little.
I I just so the X, Y, and Z buttons use your 3 items, which is very poorly explained. Maybe the manual does it better. Gee, I wish we had those here. And there's not a whole lot of like, what are they for? Like, did you fuck around with them too much? I didn't really understand. I guess one might be a health power up. I don't know.
And I tried figuring it out, but it's not very intuitive based on what it is. Like, you can't look at it and deduce what everything is. I know we all picked on this with the Zombies Ate My Neighbors. Like, you're not going to find it the first time, but like eventually, maybe it's because I played Zombies Ate My Neighbors to death. I feel like I picked up on its logic eventually. Here, I don't think you could pick up on it no matter how many times you do it. You would need some kind of guide of some kind.
Yeah, and also it's just fucking awkward because, like, okay, let's say you have a item you can throw, like a knife or something on X. In other games like Final Fight, if you have a knife in your hand, it's because you picked it up and then you're going to throw or stab with it next. You know what you're going to do. In this, it's like, oh, wait, which item, which slot X, Y, or Z did my item go to? Oh, let me press that one. That's so awkward in the middle of battle. It just doesn't work. And then there's like a block button, which most beat 'em ups don't have, but like they want you to use it here. But the way enemies attack you is so crackheadish that it's like it doesn't feel very good at all, Steve. Like even from the first enemy, didn't you notice this guy's just kind of like either he just wails on you immediately, or you just kind of trap him in the corner and you do what you did in Gargoyles, and you just kind of womp on him, and that's it.
I feel like you do womp on him, and it's funny you bring up Gargoyles because I feel like people here take way too long to kill.
Yeah.
And which is really funny because this is a comic book motif. Wouldn't you want to, not make it super easy, but wouldn't you want to kind of breeze through it a little bit to, not have everything linger on the page, quote unquote, for as long as we do? I don't know.
Yeah, it should feel a lot snappier than it is. And like the music does not work at all. It's 1995. They're going for the grunge thing. I get it. This game even came with a music CD. I probably should have listened to it before we recorded this, but I didn't. So like they were really pushing the music angle of this. And this soundtrack had like legit bands on it. You had Jesus and the Mary Chain. You had Love and Rockets. You had God Lives Underwater. I actually really liked God Lives Underwater. I still do. You had Danzig. So you had like legit music on here. I don't know if that was supposed to be the music translated into the game because I haven't really heard this stuff. But it just doesn't work. It's so Genesis-y, Steve. And I hate that. It just sounds like Genesis-y muddy dreck. It's awful.
What this probably all boils down to is a complaint I've had with Rystar. This was probably too damn soon. Like, I think if they went back to the drawing board and fine-tuned it a bit, this probably could have been a very good Saturn game. And we all know that in the right hands, in the Renaissance we're in, someone could make a very, very good version of this today in the middle of the beat-em-up Renaissance we're in. But, instead we're in the position where we are, and we're looking at, I guess this is the best we can do over at the Sega Technical Institute in 1995.
I mean, it probably is, but then there's just a lot of baffling decisions. Like, you notice, like, when you punch the doors to open them, that hurts you? Hitting the doors hurts you? Why does that happen? That is a baffling decision.
Somebody had grand ideas and they did not have time.
I just want to know what decisions get made. How does this get discussed? Like when you're creating a game. Hey guys, I think opening the doors, I think punching the doors open should hurt you. Okay, let's do that. How does that decision get made?
I guess everyone at Sega Technical Institute had a door allergy, and they're like, "Look, we need our debilitating disability represented in game."
We are moving on to our next and final game of the set. Our last game today will be Alisia Dragoon. This is released April 1992 for the Sega Genesis. You could say it's a character action game of the day featuring the titular Alisia. She can shoot lightning from her hands. It's all you need to know. It's cool as fuck. And it was a collaboration between Game Arts and the anime studio Gainax. And boy, can't you tell, Steve? Because holy shit.
This game is great. And not just because we flanked it with a bunch of other shitty games.
No, this game is truly, I've said it before on the show, and I'll say it again. I think this is the best 16-bit action game there is. It has everything. You get these wonderful anime visuals, like I said, from Gainax helping out. You get swamps, castles, ruins, spaceships. The soundtrack is incredible, too. You get risk-reward gameplay, my favorite thing. You get a pretty beefy challenge, too, on top of it, and it's a fair challenge, and it's a fun challenge, and it's an attainable challenge. It's not unfair. It's tough, but it's very doable. I think this game is a masterwork. I really do. I do feel like my opinion is a bit of an unusual opinion, though. And since we're kind of fashioning this as us being, games that we're newer to, and I'm quite familiar with Alisia Dragoon already, I want you, Steve, to talk about this a little more than me, because I'm in the tank already for Alisia Dragoon.
Oh, okay. I really don't know what I could say about Alisia Dragoon that Andre doesn't say or won't say to anyone that asks him, and won't continue to ask him to say about Alisia Dragoon. He has made it his new religion and purpose in life to spread the good word of Alisia Dragoon.
Sure have.
I mean, I'll start by saying my time reacquainting myself with the game before the show for, a level or two became almost beating the damn game again, because it really is that good. Look, I need to, bring us down back to reality just a smidge. It's not really for the faint of heart, the newcomers out there. Your character is powerful. She shoots lightning out of her hands. She has a handful of dragon familiars and one fireball guy that eats bullets and things. They're all super powerful, but you don't exactly get to walk in and push the button to win either. You have to find your lives. You start out with what you got, and there's no lives, and there's no continues, and there's no real easing you in such a way that folks are used to now. But Steve, I played Comix Zone, and they only give you one chance to do that game too. Okay, but you know what? Comix Zone sucks. It had all that. Did you listen to all the great stuff Andre said Alisia Dragoon has? Yeah. So, yeah, it's got everything you'd ever want just about in 1992 and more. So in that way, put on those big boy pants, settle down, and get good. Better that you do that here than an Alien Soldier. A handful of you people still pretend to like Alien Soldier. Just come in and play Alisia Dragoon too. If at least that's actually good, then it rewards you for your patience and learning how the mechanics work instead of that game.
Totally
Fucking
agree.
Alien Soldier.
Yeah, we can't. We are renowned Alien Soldier haters on the show. So sorry.
Like, just humor us here. Explore the levels and the way they kind of want you to. It's not like, I say explore. It's not like Metroid where you gotta like go everywhere. It's like poke over there and see what's going on, and bop those other guys, and play around with the familiars or options or whatever you want to call them. Like, just play around with the game. I don't want to lean on this analogy too much, but pretend you're us as young people. We're renting the game for the weekend. It's yours for 2 days. Now, and finally, you didn't end up with Beethoven's Second on Super Nintendo. You ended up with Alisia Dragoon on Sega Genesis, and it's kicking your ass. Okay. Now, you could go back to Sonic 2 where it's safe and you know what's going to happen, or you could put in a little work and find something really special.
Couldn't have said it better. The time you put into Alisia Dragoon, you will be rewarded for it. You will. I promise. This game is incredible at doing that for you. The better you get at it, the more time you spend getting a grip with its mechanics and what the game wants from you. Meet the game where it's at, and you will be greatly rewarded for it. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Andre, I have a small big question about the Alisia Dragoon game before we get off of this.
Okay, shoot.
Do you think any amount of you or even other people liking this game as it's appeared in the mini console or Nintendo Switch Online has to do with it simply just not being the part of the usual rogues gallery of games that Sega likes to throw at us in their Sega Genesis times. Like, oh boy, it's Sonic 2 and the rest again.
Yeah, I do think that's the case. And also, I think there have been more people like me than I thought, because I only discovered this game on the Sega Genesis Mini, the one that came out in late 2019. I got it in early 2020, like shortly before the Rona started. So like, and who knew that was going to happen? They were going to be locked in their houses for that long. So I was glad that I had this mini console to play. And so I did get around to Alisia Dragoon, because you know me, it's the whole reason why we do this show. Like we said at the top, we want to play the games that we generally have not played before for the most part. We don't want to go in there and play Sonic again or something. I mean, I might once in a while, but that's not really what we're there for. So stuff like Alisia Dragoon, that's what we're there for. And I think more and more people are starting to do that kind of stuff, whether it's from that mini console or a Sega Genesis and Nintendo Switch Online. That gives you a level of exposure. I guess we can just end on this, is that more and more on classic games on YouTube, because I like to read YouTube comments a lot just to see what people are saying. And more people are saying, hey, I used to play that on Wii Virtual Console. Hey, I used to play that on 3DS Virtual Console. You know, and it's like, wow, people are really being exposed to these things. Like, you don't really think about, like, is everyone going to go spend, $3.99 on some obscure Famicom only game that they never heard of? The answer is more likely yes than we might think. There's always going to be those people who are going to be like, where's Chrono Trigger every single time Nintendo updates these apps? And that's never going to change. But I think more and more, Steve, we are seeing a flip in this where it's like, yeah, we do want to play something different. So that's a long-winded way of me just saying, yes, I agree with you.
Yeah, I think it's, me and Kevin were just talking about this in the Super Mario RPG episode. The good thing about these apps and these re-releases is that you have a chance of people talking about these with you. Yes, I could load everything up onto the Pi and play anything anytime I want. But with Nintendo Switch Online apps, these are all available on things everyone has, and you can just go up to your friend and say, you could just go play Alisia Dragoon, and it's a lot of fucking fun, you guys. Woo!
You sure can. And that's a great thing about these apps, and that's why we will continue in the future to just pick out games here and talk about them in this format. Hope you guys enjoyed this. And as more games come out in the service, or we can just go in the depths and find some other stuff we haven't really played too much yet, or want to revisit even, we can do that as well. But going forward, this will probably be the format for this Nintendo Switch Online stuff. But until we do this again, follow us on Twitter at FineTime Podcast, and look in the description of this podcast to find our names also on Blue Sky. See you next time. Bye.
So tell of you when.
You're coasting with Fine Time.